This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. One of the biggest problems that the Cleveland Browns defense had while they had a great year last year was these weird issues that popped up on the road. Now, how much of these issues were circumstantial versus real? That's a debate, and that's what we're going to talk about. Why did the Browns have issues on the road? Are their road issues something that numbers tend to overblow, or is this something that is a real problem? Are they that much of a different team on the road? So let's kind of dive into this conversation and dig into it. And I want to start by saying, I do not have the belief that the Browns' road issues last year had a ton to do with the physical element of being on the road. I don't think that was a big factor in why they were so much different on the road. I think that's a classic case of correlation not really equaling causation. And this happens with a lot of different teams and a lot of different statistics, where some statistics will be higher for whatever reason at home than the road. And it's not really reflective of what the team's actual issues are. Case in point, the Jaguars were one of the best home teams in the NFL last year. And this year, they were one of the worst home teams in the NFL. It's kind of just cyclical. Sometimes it's just a coincidence that you play your worst games on the road or that you play your best games on the road. It doesn't really indicate one thing or the other. Also, when we look at those graphics, right, that we see that indicate that the Browns were a vastly different team, right? They were the best defense when it comes to points allowed at home. They were the worst defense when it comes to points allowed on defense. So they go from first to worst on the road. And that's what those numbers kind of indicate and communicate to the audience. I don't think that those numbers do a good job of really communicating what happened with the Browns defense and how many of those points really had nothing to do with the performance of the Browns defense. The Browns defense, especially on the road, fell victim to what I would call bad luck on offense, right? We've all seen this graphic where, oh, the Browns are the worst road team. They're the best home team. We saw it pop up in the playoff game. I'll show it on screen here right now. We've seen this graphic. But what you don't know about that graphic is some of the context that kind of makes that graphic not make as much sense, right? So if we pull up some context to that graphic, well, you have 17 points included in that equation that were directly off of turnovers in Pittsburgh, right? There was the fumble 6, there was the pick 6, there was the interception that turned into an easy field goal for Pittsburgh. 17 easy points right there directly off of turnovers that aren't really reflective of your defensive performance. If you want more, there's 14 points in Baltimore that were directly off turnovers, right? You had the pick 6 to start the game, and then you had the James Proche muff punt that gave the Ravens the ball within the 10-yard line for them to score very easily. That's also included in that equation, not really reflective of the defensive performance in that game. Denver, 10 points directly off turnovers after DTR left that game. I believe the Browns ended every single drive with either a turnover or a loss on downs. They punted once after DTR went out that game. Everything else was a turnover, and Denver got 10 points directly off of those turnovers. In LA, there were 9 points directly off of Joe Flacco. He had a near pick 6, and then he had a safety in that game, which added up to 9 points. In Houston, this is the regular season game. Houston scored 14 points when the Browns had their starters off the field because the game had been out of hand. And if you look at what the defense was doing to Houston at that time, it was a complete massacre. But they got 14 points when the Browns pulled out their starter. That number also includes the 31 points that Cincinnati scored on the Cleveland Browns with the starters out. When you see all of those points and you see that they included all those points in that stat, it makes that stat something that's very misleading. So yeah, did the Browns give up 30 points or 29 point 6 points a game on the road? Absolutely, that did happen. But is that really reflective of what was actually going on in these games? No, not even close. It's easy to overinflate how bad the Browns defense was on the road because we can all agree it was notably different than what it was at home. But the amount that it was different has been greatly exaggerated due to stats that kind of lack context, like the one that I showed you earlier. And if you take those numbers out, right, the Browns go from a team that gave up 29.6 points a game on that defensive side on the road to 20.28 points a game, which would have been good for 7th in the NFL best. So they weren't really that bad of a road defense. They weren't the best road defense in the NFL like they were the best home defense in the NFL, but they weren't the best. Like, they weren't awful. They weren't one of the worst defenses in the league all of a sudden just because they're playing on the road. I think that has been a little bit misinterpreted by the way that these numbers have been compiled, because you're not really taking into context what the defense was responsible for and what the defense wasn't responsible for. Now, that doesn't mean that the defense was perfect. They definitely had some things that they wanted to clean up. I have some things that I saw that I think they should want to clean up. The defense, well, the offense, they averaged about 2 turnovers a game at home. On the road, 2.5 turnovers. So a whole half a turnover, obviously, during the course of the season. That adds up to way more turnovers, which adds up to more scoring opportunities, which adds up to more points. But one of the bigger issues for this Browns team is this stat difference, this split from home and road. And I didn't include the Cincinnati game in here because the Browns didn't play their starters. So this is a true representation of what the Browns starters were doing in the regular season. At home, they only gave up 12 first downs a game. On the road, 17 first downs a game. Also, 9th lowest sack percentage on the road. Those two numbers are why we felt such a big difference from the Browns defense at home versus the Browns defense on the road. Like, that is a huge part of it. This Browns defense struggles when they cannot get pressure consistently with that defensive line, because this defense is predicated on its ability to get pressure, right? That's first and foremost. When this defense can get pressure, you can use your corners to the advantage, because now they're not being asked to cover as much space. They can be more aggressive. They can attack on footballs. They cannot have to worry about biting on a double move because teams don't have time to throw double moves. But when teams are allowed to double team Miles without any consequence, without any rush to throwing the football, then that becomes a problem, because now they do have time to hit double moves. Now they do have time to hit those reverses and double and end arounds and things that kind of move this defense out of place, because now when you have time to use the Browns' aggressiveness against them. What can stop a team from trying to use the Browns' aggressiveness against them? Winning on the line of scrimmage. When you win your one-on-one battles, when you create havoc, when you create hell on that defensive line, that is going to be what stops teams from being able to take advantage of how aggressive you are. You want this Browns team to be aggressive. They have the firepower that they could be very successful while being aggressive. We saw this during the year. What you want is for them to have more firepower so they can be more aggressive without the consequences of being aggressive. This is why I think some people are seriously considering that the Browns go after somebody like Chris Jones, because Chris Jones is automatically going to eat up a double team or a single team if he gets it with Miles, which is going to free up more people, which means that you don't have to worry about what if Dalvin Tomlinson is not having a good day? What if Zadarius Smith is not having a good day? All of a sudden, you have somebody like a Chris Jones that will demolish things, and then you could throw in Jay. Okay, on top of that, all of a sudden, your defense doesn't have to worry about these things. But if you look at this defense, when they had a good performance to the eye, when they didn't have a good performance, it usually boils down to, were they getting pressure? were they winning one-on-ones? And if they weren't winning one-on-ones, they usually gave up more sustained drives, which led to more points, which led to more losses throughout the course of the season. That is usually where that goes with this Cleveland Browns defense. And that is what really was their issue. So if you're asking me, how do you solve the Browns' road game problems? It's very simple. You want to get more guys who can win one-on-one battles on the defensive line. I know there's going to be a tendency for people to get like run stuffers, but you need less Siaki Ika and more Alex Wright, more guys who can win one-on-one with pass rush moves. Because if you can create penetration, if you can create havoc, that's ultimately going to protect you against teams trying to do trickery to try to get you out of being aggressive. This team needs to maintain their ability to be aggressive at all times. And when they were defeated, it was because teams kind of muted that ability to be aggressive. Yes, they can cover, they can play some zone, they can do some of those things, but the crown jewel of this defense is not Martin Emerson, it's not Denzel Ward, it's not Juan Thornhill, it's not even JOK, it's Myles Garrett. And you want to make sure that your crown jewel of this defense, led by Myles Garrett, the defensive line, is always in a position to be aggressive, because that will help it. The Browns weren't as aggressive on the road because they were able to be taken out of their aggression more often, because the misdirection stuff worked because they weren't getting enough penetration and they weren't stopping teams on early downs. They weren't getting teams behind the sticks. They were allowing teams to extend drives more often. So were the Browns as bad as a road team as some of these numbers that you've seen on TV indicate? No, they weren't. Do they still have areas that they can improve and tighten the screws and get better? Absolutely. So while they weren't as bad as people thought, they still can get better. And I think this is how they'll do it. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. These are just my thoughts. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.